Hello, and welcome to today's Connect with Control-M on performing mass updates in the Control-M environment. Today we will discuss efficient ways to make changes in your environment, including using the Find and Update utility, modifying run as accounts, changing agent parameters, using the EM XML utilities, using Control-M server utilities to manage conditions and resources. I would like to introduce today's panelists, Eric Epperson and Ted Levitt from Support. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please enter them into the Q&A panel. On today's agenda, we will start off by looking at Find and Update, transition into a demo, and then finally we'll end with a Q&A session. The Find and Update utility is available in the planning domain of the Workload Automation client. This tool allows you to search for jobs based on various search criteria, and then update multiple parameters in the found jobs. We'll show an example of using this to make changes to multiple jobs at once in the planning domain and in the demo section. To update run as user accounts, you can do this in the CCM. However, the CTM setown utility can also be used to make changes from the command line or in a script. This utility can add new run as user accounts, update the password for existing accounts, delete user accounts, and even list, export, or import groups of users. Updating conditions and resources in batch is another common use for Control-M server utilities. Using the CTM ConTB utility and the ECA QR tab utility, you can manage conditions and quantitative resources. The CTM ConTB utility allows you to manage conditions. It allows you to add, list, and delete conditions from the command line or in a script. The ECA QR tab utility is quite similar. However, it works on quantitative resources and also allows you to update the maximum value of a quantitative resource. Changing agent parameters in batch is another operation that may often be done from this configuration manager. However, there is also the option to do it from the command line with the CTM AG-parm utility. This utility allows you to list the current parameters for a specific agent and then update those parameters from the command line. There's also the CTM AG-defs utility that functions similarly. However, it sets the default values for these parameters for all agents that don't have a different value set. We've opted to leave out the CTM AG-defs utility from our presentation because it is so similar to the CTM AG-parm utility in usage. We'll show an example of using CTM AG-parm to change an agent parameter from the command line in our demo section. The EM XML utilities are a group of utilities that allow you to import and export certain objects from the EM database as XML. To work with folders, you can use the export def table and def table utilities. Export def table allows you to export a folder or group of folders based on an arguments file. And table or def table allows you to import those same tables based on the source file, which can be generated from export def table. Similarly, the utilities export defcal and defcal allow you to import and export calendars as XML from the EM database. Both of these utilities require an arguments file. The arguments file for these are quite similar. However, the parameters within these arguments file may differ from utility to utility. So you may not be able to use the same arguments file for every utility. There's also the export defjob and defjob utilities. However, they function very similar to export def table and def table, except work on the job level. We've opted to leave these utilities out of this presentation for this reason, but we will show an example of using these other utilities in our presentation. Let's move on to the demonstration section of our presentation today. Here, we have the planning domain of the Workload Automation client open. From here, we can open the Find and Update tool by clicking the Find and Update button in the top right. We'll open a preset by going to Preset and Load. This preset will remove a quantitative resource from every job that matches the name mem_intense_job, then ending with anything else. Here we can see the operation being done is to remove a quantitative resource where the name matches exactly QR memory. If we click Find, we'll see it finds a group of jobs, and by clicking Update, we can apply the change, and we see that each change is valid. By loading another preset, this time we're going to add a condition. or add a quantitative resource. Here, we're adding the same quantitative resource back to the same jobs, but we must also set the quantity, as that is a required value for a quantitative resource on a job. By clicking Update, we will apply this change, and we can see that each change is valid. Here, we're going to load another preset. In this preset, we're going to change the order method of a folder. Once we find the folder, we can pull it up by clicking on it in the bottom panel. Here we see it's currently set to manual, or none. But we're setting, in the Find and Update tool, we're setting user daily name to system. However, when we click Update, we see that order method changes to automatic. We can change this back to none by loading our preset to change user daily name back to a blank value. See, it's now changed back to none. We can see the reason for this difference by copying the folder with the Shift-Control-Alt-C key combination and pasting it into a text editor. Here we've done this before and after the change and done a diff on both files. We see in the background XML for the folder that the value, the parameter user daily, when set to automatic, has the value system, and when set to none is an empty string. The reason for this is that the workload automation GUI client will sometimes provide a more user-friendly name for certain values, but the Find and Update tool operates on the background XML, so you must use these naming schemes in your Find and Update changes. In this case, we would have been asked to make this change to the group of jobs. Let's move on to a case where you might have a group of run as user accounts that their password must change every 6 months because of a corporate security policy requiring this. In this case, it may increase your workload significantly to every 6 months manually change a large group of run as account passwords from the CCM. However, using the CTM setown utility, we can do this from the command line. Here we have a job that will run as the account test user. By freeing this job, we will see that it runs and completes successfully because the current password is set correctly. However, if we log on to the agent where this account runs and change the password and run the job again, we will then see that the job no longer completes successfully. We will see in the output that the job will have an authentication error and give a bad username or password. Let's try setting the password to something different. Now that we've run the job a second time, after making sure the password on the agent system has actually changed, we can then run the job. This time we'll see the error. By looking in the output of the job, we can see the authentication error. Authentication failed. User name or password are invalid. However, using the CTM setown utility, we can easily change this on the command line. Here we're running the CTM setown with the action update because we're updating an existing user. The option run as to choose which account we're updating, host to define which agent this is for, and then password to define the new password. Once we do this, we see that it's completed successfully, and if we rerun the job another time, we'll see that the job completes the same as it did before the password change. Let's do this now. Now that job is finished, we can also view the latest output of the job to see that we no longer have that error. Let's move on to a case where you might have a group of jobs that are running. However, you need to do maintenance on a portion of the network or on an agent where these jobs run. Normally, doing so would interrupt job execution and cause jobs to fail. You do not wish for this to happen. We can control job submission using a combination of the CTM-CON-TB utility and using a condition required by all jobs. Here we have 3 jobs that require the condition con global. If we free these jobs, we'll see that they don't submit because they're all waiting on a certain condition. However, this first job, once it finishes, it will delete this condition using the CTM-CON-TB utility. We can see this in the command section. By going to waiting info, we can quickly add the condition it's waiting on, and we'll see the first 2 jobs start. Once job A finishes and deletes the condition, job B will still continue and finish successfully. However, job C will not finish, as it is still waiting for that condition because it was deleted before it could start. At this time, you would be able to do any maintenance you need to do without impacting your job's execution. You could easily resume processing of your jobs by simply adding the condition back using the CTM-CON-TB utility. To do this, we use the CTM-CON-TB with the option Add. Here, we'll do it, and we must set the date to today's date, which is the 26th. Once we do this, we see it's been added, and if we go back to our client, we see the job C has started and then ends successfully. Doing this to schedule these pauses in job submission ahead of time frees your operations staff to monitor other mission-critical processes and work on other projects. Let's move on to another case where you might have a group of jobs that run on a certain agent. And these jobs all require a certain resource, say a large amount of memory. In this case, we can use the ECA QR tab utility to manage the value of the quantitative resource that each of these jobs require. Here we're going to set the value of the QR memory resource to 0. And then we'll free all the jobs in the viewpoint. When we free these jobs, we'll see that they go into a waiting resource state, i.e. turn blue. This means they're waiting on a resource, since there are not enough resources to satisfy any of these jobs. However, we can change this by setting the value of this resource back to 8 using the ECA QR tab utility and specifying the update option, the name of the resource to update, and the new maximum value. See that once we do this, up to 4 jobs start off at a time, because in the Find and Update section, we set each of these jobs to require 2 of this resource. Doing this prevents any of these jobs from overrunning the amount of resources available on the agent where they run. This prevents extreme performance impacts from these jobs or even possible crashes of the OS. You may also want to limit the maximum value of this resource when non-controlling processes execute on these agents and take up parts of that resource. In this case, you could use the ECA QR tab utility at the beginning of that execution and lower the maximum amount by the appropriate quantity. And once that process is finished, you'd be able to use the same utility to set it back to the original value. This prevents the same situation as too many jobs running. Let's move on to a case where you might need to change a group of agents to be in persistent mode because you have a network issue causing the agents to go unavailable, and you don't wish for this to happen in the meantime until the networking team resolves this issue. You can do this from the CCM. However, for a large group of agents, it might take a good amount of time. CTM AG utility is likely a faster option. we can use this utility to see the current values of these parameters using the list option. Here we see that persistent is currently set to no. And to update this, we simply need to use the update option. Here, we specify CTM AG parm update. Then we tell it the agent name we wish to update, the parameter to update, and then the new value. We see that the command updated the value successfully. By doing a list again, we see that persistent has now changed to Y. We can also do a CTM diag comm to this agent. Once this finishes, we will be able to see that it is now using a persistent communication. This will work as an alternative until the network team is able to resolve the problem. Now let's move on to a case where you might want to export a group of tables and calendars from your EM from one data center into another. Doing so will allow you to move these jobs and calendars into a new data center for testing purposes. We're going to use the export def table, export def cal, def table, and def cal utilities. However, it is worth mentioning that there's another control and product that can do this for you that we have covered in a previous webinar, Workload Change Manager. We're using this as an example. Here, to export the tables, we'll run the export def table command using the pf flag to specify a password file. Then we will use the s flag to specify the name of the GUI server we will connect to, the arguments flag to specify the arguments file that defines which folders to export, and then out to specify which file to save the output to. Let's go ahead and run this command. This command will produce the same XML output as exporting folders from the EM Workload Automation client. Here we can see the arguments file we've used. We're exporting every folder that is for the CWCM SCED data center and matches the name CTM star. So it starts with CTM. An example of the password file, you can see here, the syntax is user equals your username and password equals your password. This prevents you from having to put your password in plain text on the command line. Here we can see that it's exported the outputted XML into this file. Similarly, we can run the export def cal utility to do the same for calendars. We see that the options are the same. However, we're specifying the arguments file for our calendars, as the parameters are different. You see that it's exported two calendars. And if we open our notepad back up, we'll see it's saved them into this file. Now, in this case, we've opted to use the Unix utility sed to change every instance of CWCM SCED or data center equals CWCM SCED in these XML files to data center equals CWCM testing. Let's go ahead and run this here. See, once the command finishes successfully, going back to our notepad, we'll see that the files have been modified and the data center name has been changed in both files. Now we can use the def cal and def table utilities to import the changed files back into our EM database. The PF and S options are the same. However, this time we will specify -src for a source file we will use for the import. You'll see we've imported two calendars for the CWCM testing data center. and the command is similar for def table. Now we see we've loaded 3 folders and 5 jobs. If we go back to the workload automation client and to the planning domain to view our calendars, once we refresh, we will see the new calendars imported for the CWCM testing data center. The same if we go to the folders view and refresh. We will see new folders for the CWCM testing data center. In this case, these are not synchronized because we don't have this data center connected, but if it were connected and set to synchronize, they would synchronize automatically. This concludes the demonstration section of our presentation. On the tips and tricks slide, we have links to our documentation where you can find more detailed usage for some of the utilities we've covered today. You may find this information useful if you choose to use some of these utilities to make changes in your environment. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend. I hope the information provided was useful. As you close the webinar, you'll be presented with a survey. We encourage you to fill it out and provide feedback on where we can improve, and about any future topics you would like to see. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can also view our past recordings on BMC Communities, YouTube, and iTunes. Our next webinar topic will be Forecast and Batch Impact Manager. We also recommend visiting the BMC Communities page to get connected with other users, view webinars, post questions, and search for answers. BMC Communities is accessible from the bmc.com homepage or at communities.bmc.com.